In most of the videos I've shown so far, we've worked in the online P5JS web editor. And that's a really useful tool because it's available on the web, and then that means that I can create a sketch and then share the link with you, and then you can go and copy it and learn from the code. But sometimes you might want to be able to work offline, so not through a browser. And what you'll need for that is a text editor. So that's what we're going to do today. Look at how do you install your own text editor, what a text editor is, where you can get them, and how you need to set one up for P5JS. Really, a text editor is just a way of editing plain text. And the kind of key difference there from other word processing software that you might have used, like Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or Google Documents, any of those kind of editors, is they allow you to add formatting to your text. You can make text bold or change the color, things like that. With a text editor, all you're editing is the text, and that's the kind of editor that we need for programming in. Most programming languages, the vast majority of programming languages, are written in a plain text editor. So the P5JS web editor is a plain text editor. We're editing plain text here. And you've probably got some plain text editors on your computer at home already. So if I'm on a Mac, I can open Textedit. And by default, this will edit rich text. So if I make the font a little bit larger here. So this is rich text because I can go in and highlight that word and change the color. I can make it bold or italic. It's that sort of formatting that you get in a rich text editor. But this is also a plain text editor because I can go in here and say, make plain text, and it'll ask me, am I sure I want to do that? And if I click OK, you can see it takes away all of the formatting, and now it's just plain text. So it's a little bit boring, but this is actually the kind of editor, this is the kind of text that we need for programming. All right, and if you're on Windows, you would be familiar with Notepad, or on Linux, there are many other editors that probably come free with your operating system. This will work fine. You can actually do all of your JavaScript programming and web development in this kind of plain old text editor, but it's not a very fun experience, and it's not very easy to use for coding. So most programmers will go ahead and download a dedicated text editor that's designed for programming. And I'll just mention a couple to you. There are probably thousands of them around, but three good ones are Sublime Text is a good text editor. This is you can pay to use this software. I think there is a trial version as well, but it's a very good text editor. Atom is another really good free text editor. And the one that I'm going to go through today, Visual Studio Code. This is written by Microsoft. It's available free, and it's available across all platforms. And the thing I think that makes it really useful is it has a great set of extensions that you can use to add features to the editor. And I'll show you a couple that are really useful for P5JS. Before I download that and kind of talk about the editor, maybe I should just sort of go in a bit more why we would want to do this, right? We've got this great web editor that we can use. Why do we need to go to the trouble of downloading our own and setting this text editor up? Well, I mean, you don't need to. Like, if the online web editor is good enough for you, that's totally fine. But some of the things you might want to think about is if you wanted to work on your sketches when you're not connected to the internet, then you're not going to be able to connect to the online web editor, and you're not going to be able to do your work. So having an editor that can run on your own computer is useful for that reason. Another problem might be that you run into a bug with the online editor, and it's crunch time. You need to get your work done, and you can't really afford for there to be a bug stopping you from working. If you've got your own editor, you've got an alternative, so that might be another reason. It's also a lot easier to access the files that are in the sketch. So through the web editor, I can go to Sketch and then add a file, or I can click here and then I can kind of click on the down arrow and I rename or delete things. But if I'm just working on my local computer, it's just a matter of going into my folders on my computer and renaming things or dragging and dropping things around. It makes it a lot easier to do that kind of work. And lastly, I'll show you some problems that you might run into if you try to just download your sketch and work on it properly, that we can solve with the text editor that I'll show you today. So let's say I've got this sketch and I just set this up so that it would show some kind of title text for this video, but really the idea of this sketch was that it loads an image and then it lets me draw on the screen. Right, so in my project folder, I've got this sky.jpg file added, and that's being loaded into the background image and drawn to the background of the screen. If I go ahead and download this file, this project from the P5JS web editor, it's taking a while, isn't it? Let's try that again. Sketch. Save it. It looks like maybe my internet has actually, let's see, file, save. I mean, this is actually beautiful timing because it looks like I promised this wasn't set up. It looks like my internet has dropped out. Just let me test that by going to Google, google.com. Oh, that's working. Test. That's working. Here it says no internet. Let me just try reloading. Okay, so now it has worked. So it actually looks like my internet dropped out for a second there. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but another reason why it's sometimes useful not to be relying on the network. So I've downloaded that sketch, and I'm going to just I'll extract that and drag it onto my desktop. And I can open that up, and I've got all the files there, and I can actually even, if I take my index.html and drag it into my browser, I get this problem, like it just stays loading. And the problem is because it's trying to, P5JS is trying to use that load image function to download the image from the network. But here we're not actually reading the file from the network, we're just reading it from the local file system. And because of security restrictions on the browser doesn't allow us to just load local files in that way. So we get this kind of loading screen. So we need a way of working on our files locally, but then also previewing them in the browser locally. So I'll show you how to do both of those things. Just close that. So yeah, my choice for an editor is Visual Studio Code, and you choose whatever editor you like. There's lots of different opinions. I think this is a really good one because it's got great extensions that can help you in your coding. So once I've opened it up, I'm going to say File, Open, and I'm going to open that folder that I just downloaded, which is on my desktop. And I just open the whole folder, and what that does, it adds all of the files that are in that folder to my editor. So I can click into the index.html and then into those library files as well. I don't really need to worry about them. And then into the sketch file. There it is, and then the style.css, I can see that there. And then it even gives me a little preview of my image, which is really handy. So in the sketch.js, so let me just actually comment out this preloading of the image, and I won't draw the image to the background. And what I'm going to do is just show you again that if I go back to the browser and drag that index.html in, it does show the sketch, and I can do the, I can do the drawing, it shows the text, but the problem is when you try to load something over the network, like using image load or load JSON, this part here, when I do that load image function, if I refresh this page, I just get loading because it's trying to access something over the network, but it's on a local file system. Okay, so what we need to do in Visual Studio Code is we'll install an extension that lets us run a local server to preview our work. So I'll click on the extensions icon. It's just the bottom one on that very left side. And I'm going to search the extensions for live server. There are a few different versions of these. I've used this one and found it worked for me without too many problems. So you just click on it and then install. There's some description of how it works that you can read through. Another one that might be useful for us doing P5.js work is the P5.js Snippets. And there is also a live P5 extension. I haven't tried that out, so you might like to see if that works for you. It looks like it's kind of a preview server as well. All right, so now that I've got that set up, if I go back into my sketch, and I'm going to draw that image back into the canvas, save it. After I installed the Go Live server, down on the bottom of the screen, down here, it added a button, Go Live. And if I click that, it says starting, and I'll just change back. It says server is started at port 5500. So when we run a server, it provides its information over what's called a port. Most web servers serve their information over port 80. And when you request information from a website, it's coming over port 80. But when we run it locally, often it's run on a different port, just to so we don't mess up other things. So this one is running on port 5500, and because it's an unusual port, that's why we need to have that number there at the top, colon and then 5500. But you can see that the editor is working. Now, one of the nice things about this is if I do something like change my code, so change the background to be red, it does that, and then it reloads the page live. And actually, if I just get rid of that background part, and then we should see that photograph, that image is displaying correctly on the background. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's lots and lots of other stuff to explore with editors. One thing that you might like to look at is if you go to the preferences for like Visual Studio Code, click into the settings, and then if you just search on theme, I think, you can change like different kind of color schemes. So you might like to have a red color scheme. I don't know why you would want to do that, but maybe that's your thing. There's lots and lots of different ones. So you can find a kind of a style for the editor that works for you. Lots of stuff. And like I said, one of the things that's really great about working locally is that you can just drag stuff into and out of your sketch, right? So if I want to remove a file, I just drag it out. If I want to add it back in, I just add it in. So that's an example of working locally in a text editor, and I hope you enjoyed that, and happy creative coding. I'd like to see what you come up with.